Hello friends, it's Lex at LexReads. Welcome to Video Every Day in April, video 4. We're going through my quarterly stats today. So I know that not everyone is super interested in these statistics videos, but it's something that I really like watching. A couple of the booktubers that I follow usually do quarterly stats videos, so I'm just going to talk you through some of my reading statistics. And after we go through my statistics, I'm going to be telling you my 3 favorite books from this year so far. One from every month, I think. Maybe 4. I'm going to talk about 4 books. My 4 favorite books of the year so far. Whatever, let's do it. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to say is that I have read 21 books this year, which is wild. This is about the number of books that I read in the entirety of last year, and it's only been 3 months so far. Which is awesome. I'm really excited about that. I'm really proud of myself. As far as my breakdown goes, I read 9 books in January, and then 6 books in February, and then 6 more books in March. Do you like my pretty graphs? I made graphs. Am I a nerd? I think I'm a nerd. And then the page breakdown for that, I'm reading these numbers because I'm not going to memorize them. So I read 2,995 pages in January, 2,158 pages in February, and 2,288 pages in March, which is really cool, I think, anyway. And as far as screenplays go, I've read 3 screenplays so far this year. I'm not doing too hot on that. I need to get better with the screenplays. But I read 1 in February and 2 in March. All right, so breaking my books down a little bit more, I'm going to do broad genres and then specific genres. So I read 5 thriller, mystery, horror, 9 contemporaries, and 7 fantasy and/or sci-fi in the first 3 months of this year. And then a more specific genre breakdown. So I read 3 thrillers, and then I read 4 romances, which is kind of a lot for me because romance isn't typically my thing. And then 4 dystopians, which, if you've been here for a minute, you'll know that tracks because a lot of my favorite books are, in fact, dystopian novels. And then I read 2 horror books, both YA horror. 2 realistic fantasy books. 5 of what I'm going to call sports fiction. That seems skewed. It's because they're all for the game. So I read the All for the Game trilogy and then reread the first 2. And I haven't gotten to the 3rd one yet, but I'm doing a reread. So it's 5 books, but they're all the same series. I don't really read sports books that much, so that's a little bit skewed. That's weird. Oh, and 1 coming-of-age novel. The age demographics that I was reading in. So I read 11 young adult books, and then I read 6 new adult books, which is kind of a lot. I don't read new adult very often. To be fair, I did count All for the Game as new adult because it reads pretty YA, but it has a lot of mature themes. There's a little bit of sexual content toward the end, and they're in college. So I felt like it was fair to call it new adult. And then the other one that was new adult was The Guy on the Right, which they're also in college, and there was sex in that one, but it wasn't quite adult enough to feel like an adult novel, so I called it new adult. I don't know if those are technically what those are, but I've decided that they are. And then I read 4 adult books. Okay, so my star distribution, I feel like you guys are going to judge me a little bit because I judged me a little bit. So I read 1 1-star read and 1 2-star read. And then I read 2 3-star reads, 4 4-star reads, and 9 5-star reads. I know I had a little bit of my like rating crisis back in late January, and I posted it early February, where I basically was just like, I've been trying to utilize the full scale of ratings better. I don't know if I necessarily did that, but I'm working on it. So, yeah, just about half of my reads were 5 stars. This one is interesting because it's almost a dead 50-50 split. I read 11 physical books and 10 ebooks. This one is interesting too because ebooks are a brand new thing for me. I did not read ebooks until this year, and I kind of have been doing this new system where like I will buy ebooks for certain books that I have to read for, maybe it's for a video and I'm not sure that I'm gonna like it, or it's just a book that I'm like just apprehensive enough to like buy it as an ebook, or I just see it when I'm perusing and it's a pretty good deal, and so then I'll buy and read the ebook, and then if I fall in love with the ebook, I put it on a list to buy a physical copy. So there are a few books that I read that are ebooks that I do plan on buying a hard physical copy for, but it's a pretty good system, and I think for the books that I don't like quite as much, I do think it'll save me some money because I won't be spending $20 on a hardback book that I think is 2 stars. Of all of the books that I read, 17 were new reads, so 17 of the books were books that I have never read before, and 4 were rereads. So I also usually reread a lot more than I have been, so I'm doing really good at trying to take chunks out of my TBR shelf because my TBR shelf is a little bit intense. My April TBR has a good handful of rereads though, so for the next quarter I might balance that number a little bit more, but we'll see when we get there in, what is it, June, at the end of June. And another thing that I just thought would be interesting to look at, 13 of the books that I read are a part of a series, and 8 books are standalones. I have been a little bit vaguely annoyed in the last like year or so with how like every YA book is part of a series, and I like want to read more standalone books just because I think they're more manageable. A lot of times I'll like read the first book in a series and I'll like it, but I'm not like in love with it, and I don't want to spend, 7 hours or however long reading the next 2 books or the next 3 books or whatever it is to finish the series out. So I wanted to look at the numbers on how many of each I do read. Okay, so this next part is another thing that I know not everyone cares about, but this is wild. You should listen to this because I think it's actually insane. So the fanfiction amounts that I read, I'm going to read these numbers too because they're kind of long. So in January, I read 297,323 words of fanfiction, which I said in my January wrap-up. So like if you watch my wrap-up videos, you already have heard that number. And then in February, I read a little bit less, and I was a little bit lazy and didn't want to do the math in February, so I didn't say it in my wrap-up, but I read 195,881 words of fanfiction in February. My March number is absurd. It, doesn't even look like a real number. Are you ready for this? I read 1,054,832 words in March of fanfiction. So for a little bit of context, I like to give you guys context for word count because I know word count is a lot different than page count, because you hear 297,323 words, and to me that sounds like a lot of words, especially when I know that the minimum number for a standard novel is 50 to 60,000, but those are pretty short novels. So in January I read, so the Hunger Games is 99,750 words. So in January I read the equivalent of 2.98 Hunger Games. So I read the Hunger Games basically 3 times. And then in February it was 1.96 times did I read the Hunger Games, and compared to March, that is 10.57 times. So it's like I read The Hunger Games 10 times. And then almost again. But in fanfiction. So I basically read 16 and a half books this month. It's just that only 6 of them are like trackable on Goodreads and stuff. That's wild. Okay. So those are all the like statistics that I have for you guys. So now I'm just gonna talk about my 4 favorite books that I read in this quarter. The favorite that I read the earliest in this year is These Witches Don't Burn, which I think is by Isabel Sterling, if I recall correctly. This book is awesome, y'all. So 5 stars. It's a YA realistic fantasy like mystery about a young girl who is an elemental witch in Salem, Massachusetts, trying to solve a mystery involving like a new witch that is hunting them in town. It's queer. It's so fun. I devoured it. And the sequel, This Coven Won't Break, comes out in June, I think. So I will be picking that up when it releases. And the fun thing is, so there's like a bit of representation in the book. We have a bisexual character, ? At least 1 or 2 bisexual characters. We have the main character is a lesbian. And then there's also a trans character who, if I recall correctly, he's trans and gay. And he's a cool character. So like we got like a handful of representation in there, and it was really fun to read. Next, I'm just gonna lump these in together because technically my second one is The King's Men, which is the 3rd book in the All for the Game trilogy, because of the 3, The King's Men is my favorite. I'm gonna post an entire video, I think later this week, just talking about the All for the Game trilogy, because I have a lot of thoughts. So I don't want to take up too much time here, but I gave it a 5 out of 5. I would protect Neil and Andrew with my life. I love Nikki. Matt Boyd deserves the world. Dan Wilde is a badass. Allison and Renee are the coolest people ever. Aaron's pretty chill. He annoys me sometimes, but Kevin deserves better, honestly. I just fell in love with all of these characters and the story, and if you haven't read it, look into it, and if it sounds like something that is up your street, read it. I do fully recognize that just because I like it does not mean that it is a series for everyone. And there's also like a slew of content warnings with that one, but it was one of my favorite books that I've read this year. All right, the next book that I read that made it to my top 4 is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. This is a debut YA horror mystery story following a group of women at Raxter Academy, which is this like boarding school on an island off of Maine, and they all get sick with something, like everything on the island. So all of the girls, and then all of the plants and all of the animals, and they're quarantined on the island. One of them goes missing. The protagonist does everything that she can to save her. So good. So good. If you like horror at all, I highly, highly recommend. If you like mysteries, I really think you should read it because, oh my goodness, one of the best books I've read in a very, very long time. And of course, my favorite book of the year so far, We Set the Dark on Fire. This book, oh my goodness. I talked about it for a couple minutes in my wrap-up, so once again, I don't want to be too redundant, but this follows Daniela in a dystopian society where basically all of the affluent men get 2 wives, one to like organize everything and to be their like right-hand man essentially, and to host all of the parties and to keep the house in order, and then another one who like keeps him happy and bears the children. But there's like a lot of class problems going on. The further out toward the wall you get, they're like living in really aggressive poverty, and they, are treated like garbage. And then inside the Capitol gates, like everyone's affluent and happy and everything's great. And it's about a rebellion. There's an espionage element. It's queer. So good. My favorite thing that I didn't really think about until right now is that all 4 of my favorite books of the year so far have a queer protagonist. We have a lesbian, a lesbian, a lesbian, and whatever Neil Jostin is. That's all I've got for you guys as far as the stats go. Thank you for hanging out with me. I will link down below some other videos for you to go and peruse from this month. Like I said, I'm doing a video every day this month, so I will see you guys tomorrow. During normal months, I post typically 2 videos a week on Tuesday and Thursday, always Thursday, usually Tuesday, but yeah, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you guys found this as interesting as I did. Go down below and let me know if anything surprised you, what you think of any of the books that I talked about in my top 4. Yeah, that's all I got. Thank you guys so much. I will see you guys later. Bye.